Hello and welcome to DIY EV Chat, where I get to talk to the weirdy and sometimes beardy people around the world who've decided to build their own electric cars. My name's Tom Cheesewright. I've built one that's currently off the road, and you can follow that saga on the rest of this YouTube channel. And today my guest is Steve Pilcher, who's built, well, he can tell you what he's built. Welcome to the podcast, Steve.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
Good. Now tell me, well, we'll get into details. What have you built? What are you driving at the moment that is EV-ified?
Okay, so an electric RX-8, I guess. So,
a good candidate for swap, given their famously combustible engines.
Oh yeah, it did that.
So you owned the car before you swapped it, did you?
Yes, in fact, I owned it. I rebuilt the rotary once, and it lasted another few thousand miles before it ate itself again. At which point it then sat on my parents' drive for probably 4 years. I just couldn't bring myself to throw it away, and yeah, made this project from it.
We like that. We like the recycling spirit. So back to my normal first question. What's the day job? Where do you get the skills to do something like this? Is it from what you do in your working life?
Yes and no. I'm a mechanic in my day job, but I've always been somebody that's got some sort of project on the go. So fabrication, and that is what I do in my spare time.
I mean, you can certainly tell looking at the photos of your project. I'll post some photos on the show notes, but putting yours side by side with mine is just, well, I was going to say it's embarrassing. It's not. It's aspirational.
It's just finessing stuff, isn't it? Basically.
So you're a mechanic, so you've got the sort of mechanical stuff down. Was the electronics a bit of a shock to the system, or you'd done bits of that before?
So I've always had an interest in electronics, but like when it comes to writing any code or anything like that, I haven't done that since I was in school. So long forgotten. So that was probably my biggest learning curve, was teaching myself how to code for making little Arduino microcontrollers and stuff like that all over again. So yeah.
You said you've always had a project on the go. What sorts of other projects are in your past?
Track day cars, restorations of like classic VWs and stuff like that.
Nice.
So yeah, usually ones that are rusty and require lots of welding and stuff like that. So
this time it was something that was completely rust free, but just lots of mechanical work.
Yeah, lots of custom fabrication, that's for sure. But I enjoy that. That's something I really like to spend the time on.
So you'd done lots of combustion engine stuff before. How did you stumble across the EV conversion community?
I can't really remember how I stumbled across it. I've been toying with lots of different ideas of things to put into this RX-8 to get it back on the road, be it a Mazda V6. I even toyed with the idea of putting a turbo diesel 4-cylinder Volkswagen engine in it, just for bags of torque. But none of them seemed to fit the spirit of the rotary-engined vehicle. I don't know whether somebody suggested to me electric, or I guess it was just in my conscience. And anyway, so I started doing a little bit of research into it. Found Damien Maguire's videos on YouTube. So I guess his budget, sort of £1,000 build, was my first real inspiration.
And that led you to the DC route originally, did it?
It did, yes.
So tell us about that first build.
So the first build, I wasn't involved in any community, hadn't heard of the Open Inverter Forum, so everything that I knew was based on very little information. I bought the first motor I found, which was a massive 13-inch diameter forklift truck motor. Was it forklift? Milk float motor. And built my own IGBT power stage to run it, and just had some car batteries, which was, disappointing in terms of range, that's for sure. At which point I went on to upgrade to the BMW FEP hybrid modules, which
So
is
when did you do the first round? When did you start this with the DC approach?
Now you got me. It's going back a while now. It must have been the first lockdown.
Okay.
That kind of time.
So this is all evolved relatively quickly then.
Yeah, I don't like to stand still. I have a real problem with having nothing to do.
So you swapped out the car batteries for the BMW FEV modules. Is that the sort of 2016 ones, the ones that are sort of...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're 26 amp hour modules. Same as you're using.
Yeah. And that gave you some range, did it?
It did, and I blew up my home-built controller about 3 days in.
What killed it?
Probably just a lack of being up to the job. It was a very basic power stage with no DSAT, no nothing. So, it was going to die. After that, I went on and repurposed a Prius Gen 2 inverter to run the DC motor, which is possible. It's not very common, but it is possible. So that worked quite well for a while. I possibly did 300 miles like that. And then I melted the motor. It was a lot of fun. You could go everywhere sideways from fourth gear from standstill.
Wow.
So,
I now know what the quote on the cover of this is going to be, and then I melted the motor.
Yeah. So, it's one of those things, It probably would have lasted quite well if I had it at a lower setting, but I'm not that guy. If you're going to do something, I would just turn it up to 11 straight away, see what's going to fail.
Stress testing, just stress testing.
At work we call it the Steve test. If a car really needs a test, Steve test.
So you got
tell my customers that.
They won't be watching. It's fine.
No, that's true.
So you got you didn't destroy the Prius inverter in this process.
No. I mean, that was good to dump about 1,000 amps into that DC motor, which is hardly a surprise that everything inside it turned to plasma.
So what was the next step?
Well, I did a little bit of sulking. And
fair.
And then got on to the process of, right, well, I need to do this properly. I need to go AC drive. And then apparently, because I don't like to do anything the simple way, I started looking at alternatives to what everybody else has done. Why go down the path that everybody's already done? So I got hold of a Lexus RX-450 transaxle, which is a front-wheel drive gearbox in effect. It's not designed to power a rear-wheel drive car. But it has got two good powerful motors in it, each about 100 kilowatts capable. So with that in mind, I threw away the drop gears, the differential, the power split device, machined up a coupling to couple the two motors internally. That power now gets outputted through what was the input shaft into my manual gearbox. So there's an adapter plate, there's a splined coupling, and then there's a heavily modified case of the original transaxle, because it would have had a massive hole in the side where I chopped the diff off, which is a stupid amount of work to come up with a motor.
Hey. And you've made all that yourself?
Yeah.
And that's what, all CNC'd or done on a lathe?
Manual lathe.
Wow.
So manual lathe, and just the aluminium welding I did on the case is all spool gunned with a MIG spool gun. So it'd be nice to all be nicely tigged up, but my TIG welder is only DC, so you have to work with what you've got sometimes.
Yeah. So let me get this right. So you've got effectively 200 kilowatt motors through this sort of modified transaxle, let's call it, into a manual gearbox, the original RX-8 manual gearbox.
Yeah.
And so when are you buying spares for that already?
I've got a diff sat ready to go in because I did an oil change in my diff a few weeks ago, and lumps of metal came out, and it's making a bit of a. It's not a happy noise. I was expecting the gearbox to cause issues first, but no, the diff doesn't like it much.
And how are your diff mounts surviving?
Seem to be okay.
They're okay so far.
Yeah. Well, in the RX-8, the diff is got this great big long.
You got the not torque tube exactly, but
yeah, it's connected between the box and the diff, so it
Mazdas give it a special name, don't they? What's it called? That
I can't. Yeah,
power train something or other. Yeah. I know the one you mean. Yeah, because I know this because Stephen, who's also building a RX-8, didn't have that on his because he replaced the gearbox with the GS450H,
which is the sensible thing to do, right?
Well, it is, except that he literally flipped his diff upside down when there's so much torque.
Yeah. Okay.
So whatever you replace, you're going to have some interesting issues.
Yeah.
So how long have you been on? Go on.
Well, without that beam, there's not a lot that holds that diff in. There's a beam with a couple of rubber bushes.
Yeah, I mean, I know I'm going to have interesting times when I put the Lexus unit in a Z3, which has famously weak diff mounting. So yeah, might be some reinforcement due there. So how long have you been on the road with this Frankenstein's monster?
So this version since June.
And it's good fun, I take it.
Yeah. I mean, I drive it every day. Any opportunity.
How many of the BMW modules have you got in there?
Currently 15.
Okay.
In a 5 series 3 parallel configuration. But I'd like to add another 3 modules just to up the voltage.
Okay, so you'd be sort of 18 modules, 3 lots of 6.
Yeah.
Taking you to what, 360 volts nominal, would that be?
It would, yeah. Just because the Lexus motors are rated, they're 100 kilowatt, but at a 650 volt rating.
Yeah.
So at half the voltage, I'm only actually making half the rated power. So I'd like to pick that up a little bit.
Because what are you using for charging?
So there's currently a Outlander charger in the boot.
Because that's fine up to 400 volts, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. And I'm part way through doing a Shidemo fast charge.
Nice.
I've got all the bits waiting, but
right.
Time.
And what sort of range are you getting with the 15 modules in there?
It's heavily dependent on how much fun you want. I literally live like 3 miles from work, so I'm not too fussed about how much range I get. I have had up to about 60 miles out of it in the summer months.
Very good.
So,
that gives me hope.
Yeah. I mean, I've got the lowest voltage set at about 3.4 volts, I think. Below that, my cell delta starts to drift quite a bit. So,
yeah,
I don't think they're necessarily the best modules for that.
No, well, I think the later modules with the higher energy density, I'm hoping are better. Yeah. What else have you used? So you've got the Outlander charger at the moment. You've got the Prius Gen 2 inverter. You've got the RX450 transaxle. What sort of rounds it out? What are you using for braking and for power steering?
So luckily, the RX-8's got a really nice power-assisted rack.
Ah, okay. Electric.
Yes. All electric. So all you have to do is send it a couple of CAN commands that the original ECU used to send, and it wakes up and it works fully autonomously.
Brilliant.
That and a Volkswagen vacuum pump.
And you got that on some sort of sensor, have you? For
I've got one of Johannes's little boards.
Gotcha.
It's
one of the later ones that hasn't grenaded itself.
Yes. No, it's very reliable. Very reliable. Much more reliable than my first setup, which was a vacuum switch which kept sticking.
Ah. Yeah.
But not in a position you want it to stick. In the off position.
Yeah, not ideal.
Not really. Just suddenly your brakes would be quite hard.
So being a mechanic, I'm guessing you had access to some space to do the work in, or did you do most of this on the driveway or at home? Or
So I did most of it at work, but we're a very small two-man business with a quite small workshop. Like, we've got one lift and quite limited space. It's probably not much bigger than the unit you're working out of. So
yeah, well,
so
I mean, it's
you're always fighting for space, always moving stuff around. So when you do get a chance to work on your own stuff, it's very much if it's out in the road and I've only got to do a small job, it might happen out there.
You're on the south coast. It doesn't rain down there. It's fine.
Well, it is now.
And I guess with that sort of professional background, getting the car MOT'd and stuff wasn't an issue?
No, it went straight for an MOT. I mean, I do know the MOT tester, but that wasn't a factor.
No, but I'd imagine the quality of work. Yeah, you're familiar with what's required, and you know what they're looking for. And
yeah, sure.
It was all pretty
no dangling wires,
Yeah, Jamie, take notes. Any issues getting insured?
Not really. No. I mean, it's more expensive, and you have to phone round. And so I ended up with Adrian Flux. The only thing I would say is when they do your renewal, make sure that they have actually continued the same policy over, because I found that mine was suddenly just, instead of having everything itemised, that it was an electric conversion, suddenly just said non-standard engine, 0cc.
Not ideal.
Not ideal, no.
Have they fixed that, or are they fixing that now?
They're fixing that, yeah. So I haven't driven it for a few days after I discovered that.
They're generally pretty good on communication, at least, Adrian Flux.
Yeah, no, I've not really had any issues with them. I expect they'll probably tell me that it's still covered. That's just how they've worded it.
Yeah,
it's often the way. I mean, it's often the way that a lot of these insurances that they use don't actually have the right drop-down box to say electric conversion, because it's pretty rare, isn't it?
Yeah, still relatively unusual. You mentioned that code was the thing that you had to probably relearn the most. Was that the biggest challenge on the project?
What, aside from building a motor out of bits of Lexus? People looked at me like I was some sort of madman when I said I was going to do that. They were probably right.
I can see why. I mean, given that you're building a rear-wheel drive car and there are plenty of rear-wheel drive options, it could be a straight swap.
Well, I had this thing in my head where I could have just got a leaf motor and used a leaf motor. But I was like, well, the maximum potential for a leaf motor that we know of is about 160 kilowatts we know now. If I have the right battery voltage, potential for 200. And it's a sports car. No, I'm just power hungry. That's all it is.
Does that mean you've got your eye on what the future upgrade might be?
I keep thinking, how am I going to go higher voltage? I keep looking at this big box of Prius boost inverters that I've got, thinking I could build a charger out of that and charge a 600-volt battery.
So effectively take in your normal charging voltage, run it through a booster to charge your higher voltage?
It's just an idea I'm having right now.
Okay. I mean, I like it.
It's possible.
What's been the most rewarding aspect, and did it come after turning your motor to plasma?
um, I think just driving something that you've built is pretty rewarding anyway. And I don't know if it's unique to electric cars, but they just make you smile more. I mean, I've always driven like tuned cars or fairly sporty cars, but even though this isn't necessarily the fastest car I've ever driven, it just makes you smile.
100%. I mean, totally agree. The massive grin on your face. That thing about something you've built, and something you've built that's really unusual as well. Like there
it's something that's been such a challenge as well. When you come out the other side with something that, it works. Even if it doesn't necessarily work as well as you wished it would, or hope that one day it might. It's quite satisfying.
Now, you set out to do this on a budget. I mean, that was the sort of your first post. Your first post on the project thread was about going to do this on a budget. Do you have a sense of what you've spent? I guess it's hard to do it across sort of multiple phases.
So if I'd just gone straight in at the AC, I would have spent less. But then I wouldn't have learnt as much. I might not have had such fun. Might not have picked up as many stories to tell about melting things. Making capacitors blow up that sound like shotguns going off. Lots of fun. So I don't smoke. I don't really drink. So you've got to have a hobby.
yeah. As Adamant said, don't drink, don't smoke. What do you do? I don't imagine he had EV conversions in mind. You can't be goody two shoes. You've got to have a vice, and it might as well be building things.
I don't think I've spent enough to upset the wife, so we're all good.
That's a good benchmark. That's a good metric. What's your favourite tool? Did I see some various 3D printed parts on yours?
No, I don't think so.
No?
I have got a 3D printer that's been sat in a box for 2 years, waiting for me to clear enough space to set it up properly. As if I gave you a tour of this room, you'd see what the problem was. But
I mean, to be honest, the issues I'm having with my 3D printer right now, I'd advise you just to leave it in the box. Just don't bother.
I quite like having stuff laser cut. That's
okay.
That's quite fun, because you can design it and send it, and it comes back all nice.
Who do you use for that?
So recently I've used Factory.
Yeah,
I think they're called Factory. Their online service. You can just upload a DXF file. They give you a quote, and they've been pretty good. Okay. I'm sure they're not necessarily the cheapest, but at 1 o'clock in the morning you can get a quote.
Yeah. If they're good, they're good.
The guy down the road can't.
So what's next then? Is the next focus? You're building the Chademo. You'd like to go higher voltage. Have you got room in the car for another 3 modules?
Yes, I need to build a new rear battery tray and lay them on their side instead of stood upright. But yes, there is room.
Where have you put all the batteries, by the way? Have you got?
So half of them are in the boot, and half of them are quite low slung down in front of the motor, in the front of the car.
Gotcha.
So
it's quite well balanced then.
Yeah, no. When it went on the MOT rollers, which also weigh the car, it was pretty much 50-50 split.
Brilliant.
So that was quite good.
So yeah, you got voltage upgrade, Chademo. Anything else sort of on the horizon? Maybe more power.
More power. Always more power. No, I quite like to just tidy things up, drive it. Maybe have a more integrated VCU. So I've got quite a few small modules that control various things. Like there's a TNC that does the battery management. There's Arduino that takes over all the old functions that the original engine ECU used to do, runs the dashboard, stuff like that. It would be quite nice to incorporate them into one thing, but they work.
That's a good start. Well, I think you've given me the most obvious headline for any episode yet. and then I melted my motor. But you're back with a running, driving car, which is amazing, and one that sounds like an awful lot of fun.
It is, yeah. I mean, the good thing about using those motors that I did use is they produce quite a lot of torque per kilowatt because they're quite large diameter, I guess, and relatively low revving, really. The torque per kilowatt's pretty impressive. So round town, I don't leave third gear, and it'll spin the wheels in third gear from standstill in the dry. So
A, that sounds like a lot of fun. And B, it sounds like it should be a good candidate for other people to use. Maybe not quite as modified as you've done, but as a front wheel drive option.
I think as a front wheel drive motor, it's fairly well. I don't think anyone else has used it. No. They're not as common as Prius motors, and obviously with two motors, there's a bit more control issues. So tuning the twin motors with two separate control boards, it's a bit more complicated because you can end up with, say, if one wasn't tuned particularly greatly and you were having torque oscillations, well, then you have the controller from the other motor fighting that one. So you kind of almost have to tune them individually and then combine them, and it's a headache that people could avoid. Yes. And I maybe should have.
There are other options, but nonetheless, a very, very cool project indeed. And thank you for coming on and sharing it with me. That's been great fun.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to my ramblings.
My absolute pleasure. You've made me laugh a lot. Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you to you for listening / watching, whichever you're doing. This is on YouTube. It goes out on Spotify. It goes out on Apple Podcasts and all of the others when I get the audio version out. And there'll be show notes on that go with the audio version. They've got photos in, etc. So do check that out. Thanks for watching and listening. Do subscribe if you're not subscribed already. There will be more episodes of DIY EV Chat over the course of 2023. I don't have any more lined up right now, but I'm planning to, since the regular watchers of the channel know I'm losing my garage, so I'm going to be doing more indoor content rather than more outdoor working on the car content for a little while until I get something sorted, but I am working on it. I'm very much trying to get back in a garage, even if it's not my garage. That's it. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.